See, Butz, there's a little bit of a court case that was announced this week. Some folks on your side of the aisle had predicted how this would go, but Medicaid expansion approved by the voters. The legislature didn't fund it. Went to the Supreme Court, and really, people think it's just a bunch of Democrats, but you had the House Republicans' own lawyer on the side. There's some Republicans support Medicaid expansion, and they won.
It's not just Democrats, clearly. I mean, it's the business community, it's the rural hospitals. It was the will of the people. A little bit of that Catholic in me, the salus populi. You learn a little Latin back in school. And I know we say it's the welfare of the people, but it's the health of the people. And it directly applies in this case. This is good policy. It's good health policy. It's good humanitarian. It's good economic policy. I believe this is going to be a big win.
To Brinker, there'll be some folks that can go to the hospital in Franklin County now that wouldn't have been able to. But I've heard Republicans right off the bat, Senator Hageman, one of the more gentlemanly, subtle folks, started talking about we like the elected judge's decision, we didn't like the appointed judge's decision.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the case. But it is true. More people will be able to get care in the hospitals. Our single hospital in Franklin, Mercy, and we got a bordering one at BJC and Sullivan. But that's fact. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all pans out in the big frying pan we're in.
Scott Dieckhaus, you've been in that caucus room. When a court ruling goes against the legislature full of Republicans, and I think a lot of folks kind of thought this would be the outcome ultimately of it. What do they do now? Do they just go back and fund it? What happens?
So I think there's some interesting conversations that have already started. I think, certainly you've got people talking about court reform.
Sure.
That's going to happen. I think one of the interesting things in looking at the decision itself was essentially now we've opened the door for interest groups to put issues on the ballot without a funding mechanism to expand programs that already exist. So if it were a new program, it wouldn't have ruled that. They wouldn't have ruled that way. But for a program that already exists, we can expand that without a funding mechanism. And I think that that's dangerous. I do think that that is an opportunity that the legislature should take to put a check on the courts. I think checks and balances, we've got to check the courts.
So you say maybe you don't throw out the Missouri court plan. Maybe you check once those judges are in office, what they can do.
I think we're going to have to look at the possibility of putting something on the ballot that says, listen, if you're going to come forward with a new program or an expansion or whatever, how are you going to pay for it? Instead of putting that on the backs of the legislators.
Representative, you are one of the more common sense folks I've seen come to legislature in a long time. Medicaid makes sense for your district. The voters of the state thought it made sense for the state to expand it. But there is something too, if you're going to propose spending government money, say where you're going to get it, right? I mean, that's not an unfair, radical concept.
It's not. It was there, it was in our budget, and opportunity they did not take.
And they have the money.
And they had the money.
They'll say they have the money.
It was just dumbfounded to me how it went over. But you see who spoke, who had the last word.
Indeed, man. See, I get the sense though this is almost a one-off. It's not the best way to go for a court reform thing on something that the public voted for. That's not your. You get your good pitches to swing at. That's not an ideal pitch for them to swing at. I get the sense the court took no joy in this, but they thought let's just get this over with and move on. And I wonder if that's how at this point the Republicans would say, okay, we're just going to do this and move on now.
Well, maybe I just have a higher view of the court, but when a decision comes down 7-0 unanimously, quickly, I think you have not just the will of the people, you have the ruling of law. That's the way we settle things.